Good day, everyone. After a very successful video that I did before with Rob, or Uncle Rob, as many people will call him, I'm privileged to be back with Rob today and to discuss more about the man, what makes him tick. And he's a wealth of information, and we've had intricate discussions in the past, over the past year, in fact. And it's just fascinating to get knowledge from someone with wisdom, someone that's experienced a lot in his life. And hopefully, by having these discussions with him, which we'll try and do every 2 weeks at least, you will also be able to learn from him, as I've learned from himself, as well as many other people throughout my life. Learning is something that doesn't stop until I end up in a grave. So hopefully, you can join me and discover the man. So Rob, thank you for being with me again and for speaking to the people in South Africa. I know you're a very private person. And you would probably get along with animals better than normally with humans out there.
It might be true.
So, Rob, one thing about you that I find very interesting is, even although we've had so many different discussions in the past, you actually uh, is someone that's like my father. You've actually invented things, actually come up with things that are unique, that are South African. You manufacture and produce it yourself. And I've never even gotten to see how you do it, where you do it. And in that way, you're exactly like my father. He used to build fatal flaws into his patents to make sure that no one else can copy it. And I'm sure you're a man that can understand that. So I want you to briefly tell us about your business, where it comes from, why it's truly South African, and why the products that you manufacture, why it is unique. Because I find that absolutely fascinating.
Yes, thanks for the compliment, Des. Um, as all little family businesses start with a story, and in our last video, um, I mentioned that I had taken a position as a managing director of an international company, um, and that was during the era of sanctions against South Africa, and the international company that I worked for was forced to withdraw.
Okay, from South
Yeah,
Africa.
I think it's in America they call it Chapter 11, something along those lines. But before we go there, I'd just like to mention that I watched the last video that we did, and all the lovely comments from people came as a surprise to me. I didn't realize that stuff that I took for granted was kind of news to some people who, many people, to get caught up in the intricacies of trying to survive a single day. So, getting back to the business, I was starkly reminded by the advice that was given to me by my predecessor, who said, Rob, watch out for the Americans. And I was fired over the telephone. The CEO of a big international company was fired over the telephone in a 2-minute phone call. It went something like this: Hi, Rob. The auditors will be over in the morning at 9 o'clock. Just give them the keys and thanks very much. And now I understood what my predecessor meant when he said, Rob, watch out for the Americans.
So you experienced it firsthand.
Yes, they operate on a need to know business, very much so.
Often not a bad thing.
Yeah, it can come in handy, but for very simple folk like me, it comes as a hell of a surprise.
Of course, a shock, yes.
So I could not, even back in those days, not having any academic qualifications and trying to get into positions that I was used to with the international company was difficult, because mostly you're measured by your degrees
Yes.
that you have, degree in this and degree in that. And my knowledge really comes from experience rather than academic qualifications, which I probably would have failed the tests in any case.
But it sounds like some of the best people that invent things in the world don't come from an academic background. I find that interesting.
There's, yes, the saying that necessity is the mother of invention is true.
And human nature, I suppose, as well.
Absolutely. I couldn't find a job, so I do recall having a meeting or a dinner with a famous American basketball player while I was there, Dale Barnstable, and his beautiful wife, Jerry. And if I remember correctly, she worked for NASA. And just here's an interesting story. Over a meal in the original restaurant of Kentucky Fried Chicken, Colonel Sanders.
The very original one.
Louisville, Kentucky. Of course, the building had been rebuilt by then, but I had a lunch there, and it was the first time I tasted crispy Kentucky Fried Chicken. It was new to South Africa, and this was in the 1980s. Nonetheless, I couldn't find a job, so I remembered the conversation about some aspects of what some technology that NASA was involved in. And I, coming from a background of, let's call it air conditioning for the want of a better word, I understood the concept of where heat comes from and how it affects buildings and so on, and how the extent that people must go to, engineers, scientists must go to, in order to cool a building down.
Yeah.
And the NASA approach was to prevent it from getting hot in the first place.
Yes.
So I kind of took that idea and I made a paint.
Okay.
It took me 18 months to get the formula right, and it was really asking questions from people who were open to share their knowledge. Not very often that you get this. People tend to keep their little secrets to themselves. But I met a polymer scientist who I befriended, or he befriended me, and he gave me some ideas of how I should approach this task that I had. And I developed a paint that reflects infrared radiation more efficiently than white would. White does obviously reflect all frequencies, but there are techniques to use that reflect more and give you an extra degree or 2 or 3 of reflection of infrared.
Which can make a big difference.
It does. I know how much energy it takes to change the temperature of 1 kilogram of air up or down.
Yeah.
It takes a lot of energy because air is an insulator. It's not a conductor.
That's
of
correct.
Anything.
So you need to move a lot of it.
Yes, and it takes a lot of energy. So my first drum of paint I sold to my son's boss. She had a shop front on the beach, South Beach of Durban's beach, and the rising sun in the morning and up until noon would burn through the whole shop front window, and we painted the window for her, and she found that she didn't even have to switch her air conditioning on.
Oh, okay.
So that was my first year's turnover.
And 1 ton of paint.
1 ton of paint, 360 rand, and that was 1991, somewhere around there. So of course I understood how to make a money stretch, and I got to understand the taste of dry bread. So the end result is that as I taught myself how to make this chemical, it occurred to me that with the same sort of ingredients, I could make other chemicals with the same machine and so on and so forth. It's much like baking. With 2 or 3 or 4 ingredients, you can make scones and flapjacks and cakes. It's very similar in the chemical industry, just change it, 1 or 2 little things. Nonetheless, that started me off nearly 30 years ago, and I've put food on the table since then, and supported an extended family and closer family for going on 25, 26 years. So I can't complain about what it's taken to get me here. It's not easy to start a business on your own, and every little small business starts with a story.
Yeah. And as you said, South Africa, we were isolated at the time, so you were dependent on products that you could find here.
Yes, raw materials.
Yes.
Yeah, raw materials. And nonetheless, that's brought me to where the business is today. We make a range of construction chemicals, specialize in the DIY industry.
What is the name of your business?
The name is Cosmodec.
Cosmodec.
Yes.
Is there a story behind the name?
Yes, it's because of NASA.
NASA, okay.
Cosmos.
Cosmos,
and
yes.
I first called it Astrodec, and then somebody stopped me in the street one day and saw Astrodec painted on my bakkie, which was already 20 years old by then, and said, well, you can't use that name because I'm in the fake grass industry, and we call it AstroTurf.
Yeah.
So you better change your name. And I was naive in those days. I'm okay, well, he's going to sue me tomorrow morning, so I'll change it from Astrodec to Cosmodec.
Yes. And
that's how the business brought me to where I am now. We make a range of about 50 different specialized chemicals. We also formulate...
And when you say we, it's not a large team of people. You're intricately involved in actually doing this, because I've never seen it myself. I've just seen the outside of the business, and that's it. So
me, myself, and I.
You, yourself, and yourself. Okay.
So we also do formulate, especially for people who have a particular need. And the skills I have in formulating are all self-taught. My chemistry skills are not something I learned through a book.
Yeah.
Nonetheless, it brings me to where we are today, and I'd like to mention to folk out there that it's so important, especially in terms of what Des and Lauren are doing, to support small family businesses and to try and
local businesses,
in
your area.
Absolutely, in the neighborhood. Those sort of building blocks and foundations are important to achieve what you are trying to
what
achieve.
all of us are trying to achieve at the end of the day.
Self-reliance,
self-determination, independence.
Correct. We have progressed so far to the point that we do export chemicals to of all countries, America.
The irony.
And countries in Africa and Seychelles and so on. And also for the local market, specialized construction chemicals, we do all our business in one factory. Some of our raw materials are imported for us by wholesalers.
Okay.
And the types of chemicals we manufacture are certainly not found in hardware stores. It's direct from the factory, and we kind of pioneered the idea of delivering chemicals off the internet in the 90s already.
Okay.
And we've certainly been overtaken by companies like Takealot and Amazon, and so we specialize in deliveries.
Okay.
But the courier industry now, due to COVID, has taken off. Courier companies have doubled and tripled.
Well, the trucks on the road when you travel is just immense. I mean, we've been all over the country. I've never seen anything like it, because I've traveled a lot in the past. I've never seen the amount of trucks we have on the road currently. So I can
Absolutely.
vouch for that.
People have now gotten into the habit of buying online and trusting the online stores.
Yeah.
Although there are a lot of fakes out there, I myself have fallen prey to 2 or 3 companies that haven't delivered the goods that I ordered, and the companies actually don't exist.
Yeah.
So I've been there, I've done that. But it's not a reflection on online companies. Everybody knows the big companies that do it are reliable, fast, efficient, and that's the way of the future. It's really, online shopping is here to stay.
And that is what people are demanding in many places.
Very much so.
They depend on it, in fact. So when you get an internet breakdown like we had in some places in the world yesterday, they're not going to be able to order their products.
Correct. So
not as self-reliant as one could be, I would think.
No, it's quite right. It's a double-edged sword, but it makes me think that the COVID issue has its good side. It's made a lot of people a lot of money. It's created massive companies out of big companies, especially in the courier business, Amazon and all those specialized shops. So there's always a silver lining to every dark cloud. And now I've actually run out of ideas.
Well, I have lots of questions for you, and I think you probably don't like speaking about your business as much as you should, because I think the products, the little bit you've told me, and you haven't told me much actually. So this is really an off-the-cuff conversation. I mean, I'm finding things out as we speak, literally. And this is how I like to do interviews, as raw as possible, no discussion beforehand. Rob, the products that you've come up with, I believe a lot of them are out of need. There's a need for something, and then you create something. The last time we were with you, you described that you actually tried to find something and you didn't know or create a specific product that would bind certain things, and you needed a certain ingredient and you didn't know what that ingredient would be, and then you had to play around. And I don't want to say what it is now. I don't want to give away what we discussed at the time. And I saw some evidence of that at the back of the store, because I haven't been inside the store. I think you know what I'm talking about, but that you actually have to come up with a solution, and it takes time to develop, time and effort.
Yes, I do find that my lack of intellectual credibility, if you want to call it that, or degrees, has actually helped me, because I've tried things that scientists would shudder to try. And I've been told, literally, Rob, don't add that to that, and I, for the life of me, couldn't.
And then you would go and do it.
Yes.
And
so
see what happens.
More out of ignorance than anything else. And but it's an interesting story, because I don't want to mention names, but I can think of a handful of big companies that have copied my ideas.
Yeah.
And I don't mind it at all. In fact, I see it as a compliment.
Yeah. It's just to them, it's about money.
Absolutely.
No, nothing else.
The
yes.
pursuit of money. And it's a little bit disappointing, and I suppose everybody in the world knows it but doesn't really practice it to any great degree, is that the amount of money you accumulate is not the measure of the man.
Yeah.
The measure of the man is how much money you give away. How many people have you given shelter to, not how big your house is. Everybody kind of knows this. But I suppose the most generous people in the world are those that have come, from not born to the manor, just struggled, putting food on the table. Um, those people contribute more to the success of humanity than the people that we were earlier discussing.
Yes.
They more like drain the energy and the finances out of the masses, but the power lies really in the people, in the masses. They have the authority, they have the will to change things. We were also earlier discussing the so-called population explosion, which is fake. We don't have a population problem in the world. We never have had.
Never.
In the next 100 years, we
never will have. No.
I think the analogy we drew is that simple arithmetic will tell you that the entire population of the world can fit into the country of Botswana, with each person having 75 square meters of space.
Yes.
Now, that certainly is not a population problem.
No.
So this narrative that mainstream drive to put fear and terror into us, very effective. But I've, since coming across you and Lauren, I've realized that what you are doing is possible. Even though this huge organization that we're up against, that work sometimes well together, sometimes not, it's possible to dismantle that in favor of human endeavor. It is possible. Everyone must just carry their own little bag, and sooner or later, those folk will be irrelevant. It's as simple as that.
No, I think what you're saying now is very important. And when you could not depend on an overseas company that withdrew from South Africa to provide you with food, it was probably a blessing in disguise, because it's made you more self-reliant. You actually had to start a business from scratch in difficulty, because obviously it wasn't easy to make ends meet, and then discovery could start. Did you think it would have been possible for you to actually invent or come up with the same products you have now if you had remained where you were?
Not at all, Des. If I had known, let me put it to you this way, here's an interesting story. If I had known the path that I traveled before I started on it, I wouldn't have touched it. I would have said, not for me. I haven't got the skills, the courage, the determination, the money to do it. But people will be surprised how important it is to back yourself in any situation. Don't look to somebody else for support or favor. Back yourself, however humble you think of yourself as, however insignificant you think of yourself as. People will be wholly surprised at what they're capable of. Pushed into a corner, the human factor will shine through every single time.
Yeah, isn't that what this whole COVID situation has created?
Quite right.
Pushed many people into corners, and out of that comes invention.
Absolutely. So many small businesses have started up, family businesses, sprung up out of nowhere in the last year. And interestingly, I find that I come from Boer stock, German Boere, my family background, and the Boere, the Afrikaans people, are absolutely rising to the occasion. I find that, notwithstanding the fact that they can't actually work together, and it's a fact, they are very innovative. Businesses have sprung up, and more often than not, I see there's an Afrikaans-speaking person or an Afrikaans family behind it. And that really speaks to the resilience of South Africa, because each individual group of people, whether it's a Xhosa or a Zulu or the Indian community or the Afrika, each have their own identity, and uniquely we make a cake that is so tasty, and it's the envy of the rest of the world, and especially the people that wish to corral us and get us to. That is going to be the biggest nut for them to crack, is to work out how to get all these different Hardachat communities
to do what they want.
to do.
But the nuts is getting more and more hard. Hardachat.
Baie beslis. I like you, I don't believe they're going to succeed.
No.
We will lose some battles, but the war we will win. There's no question about it.
I think what you touched on earlier, the ingenuity amongst people in South Africa. If you just look at the people in informal settlements in South Africa.
Absolutely.
The ingenuity to survive under conditions where there's no infrastructure support really. I mean, those communities sprout up in various places and people survive. And you know, the one thing I've actually taught certain people is that if you want to find out how to survive, go and speak to a homeless person or a person classified as homeless. Go and speak to them and see how they have survived for so long. And then you'll understand how tough the South African people are. And to crack that nut, I don't think it's possible. That nut is just getting tougher and tougher. Every single day, as we are being pressured and pressured more, the pushback is harder and harder, and I don't think it's going to stop. I think what's happened to our country has been a blessing in disguise, and it's created the environment where people and the ingenuity can come to the fore, as you've said earlier.
And there's very much so. I got first-hand sight of this phenomenon when I worked for this American company. I was working late one evening, and the storeman lived in Alexandra, the township outside of Sandton, and him and I were working late, and there were no taxis running or anything like that, and I offered to take him home because I kind of lived in that direction, and I drove him into the township and was shocked to see the conditions that he lived in. And I asked him, you know, how do you get to work in the morning looking so neat and with your clean shirt and your lovely pressed pants and your tie and your jacket looks like it. And he said, well, you know, we've just got to make the best of what we have. And it literally was a tin shack. And then I realized how privileged many people are that don't realize that where they come from is so much more affluent than the vast majority of South Africans. And it has always been a sort of a surprise to me that the folk from the townships who struggle along are not more militant, not more angry, not because of anything that one race does to another race. It's just the circumstances
Yes.
that people find themselves in.
But it shows you how peace-loving people actually are.
Very much so. South Africa, human beings are actually peace-loving. There's no question about it. To say that human beings are a warring
no, it's not
item
true.
or element.
There'd be wars all the time if that was the case.
The wars are all contrived, and human beings are absolutely peace-loving. And nothing is more evident than that in South Africa.
Yeah.
Everybody wants peace except for a handful of people that thrive on division.
Well, the division drives a large international business.
Correct.
I mean, wars drive huge companies. If you actually look at World War I and World War II, the opportunities to generate income and for the elites to profit was just absolutely massive. So you create a crisis and you create the solution and you win. And you have a bunch of people subjected to a school system, to governance systems around the world. You have United Nations controlling people's minds, controlling how they live their lives, and governments fall prey to that and bow down to it. That's basically how I see the world summed up in a very brief nutshell. The opportunities that come from conflict is financial, and also creates an environment for control.
Very much so. The phenomena or the practice that is used is create a crisis, blame somebody else, and offer yourself as a solution.
Yes.
But that plays out in families as well. If
Everywhere.
If one looks at family interactions, community interactions, town, cities, country interactions, that psychological phenomenon plays itself out in human affairs. It seems to be built into our genes. And hopefully we're growing out of it.
Yeah.
Hopefully humanity is progressing so that we don't have to use that manipulative tactic in order to be comfortable.
I like the word you used, comfortable, just now, because I think someone that grows up in an informal settlement that has a bed to sleep in at night and a full tummy,
I know what you're saying.
to them that can be comfortable, and I think a lot of people are comfortable with their conditions, no matter what it is. I mean, if you think of someone that has a £3 billion pound super yacht, and they own private planes, etc., they own massive companies, what is comfort to them? I have seen those people walk around at super yacht sales being unhappy with their £3 billion super yacht, and they actually want a larger super yacht. So comfort, being comfortable can really range depending on the type of person that you are.
Very
the
much
type
so.
of humanity we want to be.
I couldn't have put it better myself, Des. As long as a human being doesn't feel threatened by one thing or one human or another, they're comfortable.
Yeah.
As long as you're not threatened. And that's why the greed that we see and how it plays out, whenever a community decides to do one thing or another, they see it as a threat, and that makes them very uncomfortable.
Yes.
Just like the guy in the township that feels threatened by a thug walking by. It's the same element of discomfort that they feel, and it's easy to make folks that are greedy or psychotic or whatever you want to call it, it's easy to make them comfortable. Just withdraw their money. The likes of you and I and us plebeians, I forgot what the hell I wanted to say.
if you actually look at people, us as the mere plebs of society, and you look at the super rich out there, and you look at the circumstances that society finds itself in right now, the fact that those people in informal settlements and even the people in middle class neighborhoods, the fact that they are happy to just go to work, to just merely survive, proves something about humanity. It is all about survival, and if you make the focus about survival, that is all you will try to do. And comfort, real comfort, which means that you actually have a comfortable life where there's no struggling or strife to survive. And you were talking about threats earlier, the person walking in the street in an informal settlement or even in a business district. And I know many people who lose their cell phones on a weekly basis in informal settlements through thugs or whoever else. And a lot of people don't consider that. A lot of people might consider poorer people to be a threat. The elite certainly do.
Exactly.
The elite see poorer people or plebs like us as a threat.
Correct.
If we don't want to work for them. And this is something that we do need to consider, because if you withdraw, you were talking about withdrawing from that wealth, the money that they need. If you don't fuel and fund that machine, what power do they have?
Correct. We, you and I, the rest of us, can literally survive on the sniff of an oil rag. But imagine the royal families of the world and that a group of specialized people. Imagine them trying to survive on the smell of an oil rag. They've never had to fix their own vehicles. They've never had to pump their own tires up. They've never had to cut their own grass. Imagine that suddenly they find that they've got to grow their own food. And that puts us at a huge advantage over folk that were born into luxury.
The thing is, they need us reliant on money for us to work for money to keep their machine going.
Correct.
So, I mean, the moment we don't need money anymore, their whole world crumbles.
Correct.
So you can withdraw from their system quite easily. And they don't make it easy to do that because you won't get all the comforts that you want. But we need to redefine what comfortable is to get through this phase.
I've got an idea that comfort really is the absence of threats.
I actually like that. I think that should be the topic of this video. That comfort is the absence of threats.
Yes.
I really like that.
Thank you.
You know, when we toured around this country now, sometimes we lived in very modest places. We've lived in back rooms. We have lived in some of the most luxurious guest houses out there that I couldn't really enjoy because it was literally in and out. I would, after a meeting, go and sleep in the morning at 7 o'clock. You get up and you have to drive on to the next meeting again and rush to get there on time. And then often be late. So you can't really enjoy that. But I never felt threatened throughout this entire year. So I always felt comfortable. So I have to agree with what you say. So redefining it is removing threats. And what is a better way to remove threats than to being self-reliant?
Absolutely.
So we just get back to the plan again.
Correct. And at some stage, you're going to explain to me how you've managed to do what you've done in the last year. As much as I've seen in the world, that will probably always remain a puzzle to me. Traveling in your vehicle with an entire family, thinking of other folks. Earlier we discussed it was a sort of a trait maybe of astrology, if you want to call it that. I can't wrap my head around anything that's not scientific, but that came up in our discussion, and there may be something to it. This selfless devotion to everyone other than yourself, putting yourself at maybe the mercy of society, putting them first and putting yourself second or third or fourth. It takes a special kind of person, and to find that all in one family, in my opinion, is unique. I've never come across it. And maybe you can try and tell me.
Well, I think it's very unique circumstances that brought my wife and I together. We actually still can't believe it to this very day. And circumstances that we can't explain. Some people call it miracles. Some people call it chance. If you look at the amount of chances that then happened over a year and even before the more than a decade that my wife and I had been together, it's difficult to say that it's just a whole lot of chances. The circumstances are too unique for my mind to believe that there wasn't some influence that actually made this take place. And you might battle with that, but to me it's a very obvious and simple thing to understand. And we can see it in everything that's happened throughout the tour. It's been a year. It's a long time of touring. We've never been sick during this time. We never had an incident, an accident, anything like that. And often, as you know, we would feel inspired to pack up and leave a place immediately, even when we've been here. in the past, and we follow that inspiration, and it's brought us to where we are. And I don't ask questions with regards to that, and I think that makes a difference. I have faith and belief that there is a higher power that understands and guides goodness on the planet. And a lot of people might not agree with that, and that's absolutely fine. At the end of the day, the plan we have to execute is to get people self-reliant. As you mentioned earlier, if you remove the threats, then you can be comfortable. And if we define that as comfort, it changes everything. And yes, I'm definitely going to make that the heading of this video. So thank you for that. It's definitely a new way of thinking about things, and maybe you should think about us doing a video just on that and discussing that as a topic specifically. Is there anything else that you would like to say? We've been going for about 40 minutes now. Anything else that you would like to say to the people of South Africa? Remember, we'll come to you again in 2 weeks' time. Rob has many ideas of things that we can discuss in future. I have no idea what they are, but they will be very specific topics. And you have a lot of life experience, Rob, and I'm really glad that you could share the little bits that you would share with regards to your business, Cosmodeck, and how that came about. And have you got a website that I can provide people a link to?
Yes, very easy. Type in Cosmodeck, and the first 10, 15, 20 lines will bring you.
Somewhere will bring you there.
And
okay, I'll pull a link out of you, and then I'll put it in the description below the video. If you want to go and look at the specialized products, it's not probably something that every Joe soap in public like myself would buy. It's probably because it is specialized. Do you perhaps want to quickly mention some of the items, or would you leave that up to people's research?
I probably prefer people to discover things for themselves rather than to spoon feed. But yes, we have a range of do-it-yourself construction chemicals that are easy to use and obviate the necessity to call in a plumber or a handyman or something, or getting somebody in to mend what your husband fixed. It makes those sort of DIY chores in terms of waterproofing or sealing, cooling, and all that sort of stuff quite easy to do and substantially inexpensive.
Okay. So a normal person, can they just order from you, or must it be a company?
Yes, anybody can order. We deliver directly from our factory to any part of the world. It's as simple as that. We have a great courier company backing us. And the one thing that I've learned in business is to form relationships.
Yes.
Your suppliers and particularly your customers need to have a personal relationship with you. The big corporations distance themselves from that. You can't pick up the telephone and speak to the boss of Pick n Pay or the founder of Pick n Pay or Checkers or all this. But you can pick up the phone and speak to the boss of your local supplier of whatever.
Yes. So they can actually phone you and get hold of you.
Phone me directly, and I will be happy to give them advice. I have many years of experience in the field that I'm in.
Okay.
And I also have found that I often get asked by PhDs and scientists. It's difficult to have this kind of conversation without what they nowadays call virtue signaling. But those sort of folks have a fantastic theoretical knowledge, but they don't have on-site experience.
Yes.
And sometimes the two are at odds with each other.
Yeah, I understand it from the nuclear industry.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I actually trained graduates that have postgraduate degrees, and yeah, it's fascinating. They still have to go through the same run-of-the-mill practical experience to end up with the same result at the end of the day. So,
no doubt.
Yeah, so I believe that studying is good.
Yes.
If it gives you information, it doesn't mean that you can practically do anything. In fact, when you're done studying, when you've got your matric or whatever, And I was in a technical school, so the moment I walked out of there, I can still today work on a car, replace a piston, service it, and all that type of thing because of the training I had in school. And I could do that straight out of school. So I suppose certain training is better than others.
I like the saying that no man's knowledge can go beyond his experience.
Yes.
And that's very true. All your knowledge that you will get in life is taught to you by yourself. The
Self-reliance again.
Absolutely. The universities teach you kind of how, or they should teach you how to teach yourself. Yeah. Research.
I'm not sure that that's happening today.
No, it used to be.
Maybe that can be a topic for another video.
It used to be like that. That universities' value was in teaching you how to think, but quite contrary to that nowadays is they teach you how not to think, in my opinion.
Yeah, I will reserve my comment on that now. We can reserve it for the next video when we can at some stage talk about training institutions out there and what they are producing in the world today. You know, I have a very strong opinion about the fact that most people in the world today don't actually deserve the technology that they use.
No.
Because they will not be able to even get close to delivering that technology themselves.
Correct.
They are just consumerists, and it has to end. And this is why the world's population will actually shrivel away until there's nothing left if we continue the way we are. So things do need to change. We need to become self-reliant. And the nations, I believe, that are self-reliant will stand up and become the superpowers of the future. And so there's definitely a transition now where certain nations that are considered superpowers will become nothing. And others will transition into becoming superpowers. And it will all be based on self-reliance. And it will be based on citizens. And if the citizens are not self-reliant, the nation will fall. There is no two ways about it. Rob, thank you so much. If there's any last words to the people out there?
We are living in exceptional times, and these times that we are fortunate to be observing now are going to be written down in the annals of history in years to come. We are privileged to be living in this difficult time as human beings.
Thank you so much, Rob, for your wise and kind words, and you can look forward to the next video in 2 weeks' time. Thank you very much. Till the next video.